What's going on, everyone? In today's episode, we are planting herbs. I'm really excited about this because herbs are some of my favorite crops to grow in the garden. Not only are they just so multi-purpose, but they're so easy to grow. And yet I hear from a lot of you that you are struggling to grow herbs. So I'm going to give you a few tips on how to master your herb growing game. I'm going to give you 3 herbs that are really easy to start with. And then I'm also going to talk about some easy ways to grow your herbs, because I think there's just a lot of misconceptions about what they need, their growing conditions, and things like that. So we're going to talk all about herbs as we plant out our herb garden here at the farm. Really excited about this. And so let's get started. So first I want to talk about 3 herbs that you absolutely should add to your garden. Now, if you're a beginning gardener, these are herbs that are going to be very easy to grow. And if you're a more advanced gardener, they're just herbs that you probably have already grown, but you might want to consider adding more of into your garden because they're so easy. Now, herbs can be challenging depending on which ones you choose, but there are herbs that are just so foolproof that you can basically throw them in the garden, basically barely take care of their necessities, and they're going to love you back for it. The first one is lemongrass. Now, it's probably not one you were thinking about, but lemongrass could not be simpler. Now, here in Michigan, it's just an annual. It will die. However, if you're further south and you're in a more tropical environment, this is actually a perennial, so do just fine in zone 10, 11, 12, like I said, more tropical environments. But this is an annual that will grow very fast for us right here in Michigan. And by the time this is all said and done, this plant will be 2 feet in diameter, and it'll be 3-4 feet tall, and we'll be harvesting beautiful lemongrass stalks for use in lemongrass tea, Thai lemongrass soup. We'll use it for flavoring rice and just so many amazing curries and Thai dishes. It's a very versatile herb. It's also really wonderful because when you crush the leaves, you can actually rub the leaves on you, acts as a natural insect repellent. It's phenomenal. I just absolutely love this, and it looks really great in the garden, but it could not be simpler to grow. Just make sure you focus on nitrogen. That's really it. The soil that it needs, it's not super picky. The pH is not super picky. It's not really picky about anything. It just needs lots of nitrogen because of the fact that it's a grass. So the more nitrogen you can give it, the better. We're going to be using Trifecta Plus for our nitrogen source, our fertilizer of choice. But use anything that is high in nitrogen, and it's about as easy as it gets. Second crop, this is one that I guarantee you've heard of and have probably considered growing or try growing, but basil. There are so many different varieties of basil. Basil is so unbelievably simple to grow. There's only 2 things you really need to know to growing basil. 1, don't overwater it. Basil does not like to be overwatered. It will suffer from root rot very easily. So put it in a soil that is well draining, that is not going to hold on to too much water. And when you do water, don't overwater. It does not like to be soaked for very long because it will struggle. Second thing you need to know about basil is you have to come in and prune it. Basil is one that will form flowers fairly quickly if you don't keep up on it. And all you have to do is just pinch off those top little tufts, those little flower stalks as it forms. A few layers down, it will continue to form bushier, better basil the longer it grows into the season. As long as you keep it from flowering, it's going to do amazing for you. And if you've killed basil, okay, I won't call it dummy proof because I don't want to call you a dummy, but it's about as dummy proof as you can get of an herb without just, a set and forget. And that leads me to my third, which is truly a set and forget herb, and that's chives. Chives they're in the allium family, and they're stupid easy to grow. They're so unbelievably easy. And we actually don't add them to our garden just because of how easily they do grow, that oftentimes I'll put them in containers, because if I grow chives in my raised beds, they have a tendency they can spread and they can kind of take over a space. Now, chives are great because they're very versatile, they're delicious. I love them on baked potatoes and whatnot, but you can't mess them up. You could basically throw them on the soil. Don't even bury them, don't even plant them. And the roots just go down, the tops grow up, they do fine. Only thing you want to be careful of is to not let them go to seed. When they start to form their seed heads, because they're a perennial, they'll technically a biennial, but they'll come back every year. They have a bulb, and that bulb will allow them to grow season after season. that bulb will eventually want to form flowers, and the flowers will form seeds. Simply don't let it go to seed. If you see those little purple tops with seeds, trim them off before they ever form. Otherwise, they'll spread all throughout your garden. But in terms of 3 stupidly easy crops, easy herbs that you could be adding to your garden, lemongrass, basil, and chives. Other than that though, I would actually recommend sticking away from mint, because mint, I know you're probably thinking, well, Luke, mint's pretty easy. Mint should never be planted to anyone's garden. Keep it to containers or you are going to regret it, I promise you. Next, I want to talk about some tips on how to grow herbs easier. Obviously, picking easy to grow herbs is great. That's kind of why I started with those 3 very easy to grow herbs. But next, I want to talk about some tips on how to grow them. The first tip, as you'll notice here, is that you really do want to start with well-draining soil. Almost all your herbs, with the exception of just a couple, do not like to have wet feet. This rosemary, for example, it will drop its leaves very fast if you have it in soil that holds onto water for too long. Our soil here is a mixture of our native soil and compost. It allows the water to drain very quickly through the soil, but it does hold on to the right amount, not excess. As you'll see, we have some moisture in this soil, but it's not too much. It's not enough to cause root rot. It's not enough to cause damage. Almost all your herbs will appreciate that type of soil. If you don't have that type of soil, it's better off to amend it now than to regret it later. Next tip is there are crops that like a little more water than others. And what I like to do is I like to group my plants based on their watering needs. You see, this rosemary here, this rosemary is more of a dry, loving Mediterranean herb. Same thing could be said for sage, or could be said for even basil, thyme, oregano. All those kind of Mediterranean herbs, they don't like to be overwatered. And because they like all kind of that similar arid environment, I want to make sure that we are giving them the same growing conditions. I wouldn't want to plant them next to something that loves a lot of water, because if I water that plant that loves a lot of water, the plants that don't are going to suffer. Or the plants that like a lot of water are going to suffer if I'm letting them dry out. And so because you have a lot of different crops, I like to understand how they grow and their growing conditions based on how they grow best, so that I can group them together. So I'm not putting something next to something that's going to cause it to struggle. That's just going to set you back, and it's going to cause you a lot more hassle in the long run. Next tip for all of you when you're growing herbs is focus on nitrogen. Now, we talked about focusing on nitrogen when growing lemongrass, but the same applies to growing all of your other herbs. And here's the secret why. Because all your herbs are herbaceous. That means you're growing them for their leaves. Whether it's fennel, whether it's rosemary, basil, sage, thyme, oregano, lemongrass, parsley, it doesn't matter. You're growing it for its leaves. That's what makes it herbaceous. And because you're growing it for its leaves, you want to focus on nitrogen. Now, nitrogen is going to aid with leaf development. And so the more you can give it within reason, the better. Obviously, we're going to be using Trifecta Plus to fertilize our herbs, but use whatever fertilizer you feel comfortable with or is accessible to you that has good amounts of nitrogen. Blood meal is an awesome example. Fish fertilizer is another great example. Decomposed or chicken manure that's kind of had a chance to cool off. Chicken manure is very high in nitrogen, but it can be very hot. And you don't want to apply hot compost or hot manure to your plants because it can actually cause damage. But once it sits for a couple months, it's awesome as well. Really, anything that's high in nitrogen is great for herbs. And I think a lot of gardeners kind of forget that. They forget that basically all their herbs are all grown for their leaves. And that's something that I think is very easily forgotten. But once you realize that, it's just, oh my goodness, it becomes a whole lot easier to grow herbs once you realize that they all kind of need that same. They do need a balanced fertilizer, but they all need at least nitrogen and a good amount of it. And then the final thing I was going to talk about, and this is one that I don't see enough gardeners talking about, and that is herbs to be careful planting. I touched on it a little bit when I said I don't want you growing mint in your garden, but there's a lot of other crops. I call them dangerous herbs. Now, these are herbs that can be very beneficial. They're awesome to have in the garden, but they can be dangerous. Not dangerous as in they can hurt you, but they can be invasive. Fennel is one that a lot of gardeners don't think about. If you let this go to seed, fennel will drop quite literally thousands of seeds, which might not be a problem to you. If that's not a problem, hey, click off. Just don't forget to subscribe. But this doesn't really apply to you. I don't want to be picking out thousands of fennel seedlings throughout my garden. I just don't. Those become a nuisance after a while. Now, obviously, it's a great plant. I just have to make sure to cut back the flower stalks before they go to seed. Very simple. Another one, dill. Dill will absolutely take over. There's a reason why it's called dill weed. It's because it grows incredibly fast and will actually drop a ton of seeds. Can become a bit of a weed. Again, some gardeners don't care. You might not care. I do. I've had way too many run-ins with rogue dill seedlings, and it just becomes a little bit too much to handle at times, especially when they're like in every bed, when the wind just drifts them over. Next one that can become a nuisance, like I said, mint. Mint can spread so fast. Any little bit of its stem that touches the soil for long enough can actually regrow, and it can absolutely take over a garden space and completely choke out your other plants. It can outcompete, choke them out, and you're really going to end up with a bit of a mess on your hands. Chives, as I said, chives are super easy to grow. You have to remember, just like fennel and dill, you have to remember to cut back those flowers. Otherwise, you're going to be in a bad spot. And then last but not least, you want to be careful of growing herbs that I consider them to be dangerous, but they're just herbs that they have a lot of lookalikes, okay? There's a lot of lookalikes when you get into more of your medicinal herbs, primarily around like Queen Anne's lace. You want to be super, super careful. There's a lot of herbs that are lookalikes, and I prefer to stick to herbs that I can recognize, that I can understand, because if you're growing from seed and you're growing an herb that has a very similar leaf pattern and you're a beginning gardener, there are numerous articles about gardeners that mistakenly ate wild carrot for Queen Anne's lace and ended up forever sleeping. It's really unfortunate. It doesn't happen all that often, and I'm not trying to scare you, but there's a lot of herbs, especially herbs that have very similar leaf patterns to some not so great herbs, or herbs that can cause you, indigestion, diarrhea, just nasty problems. So I like to stick to herbs that I could recognize as I'm getting used to growing herbs. With tomatoes, there's no discounting tomatoes. Like, I know what a tomato looks like. I know what a broccoli looks like. I know what those look like. With herbs, you can get into some uncharted territories if you're a beginning gardener. And that's all I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to scare you. Just be careful, because those can be a little bit on the dangerous side. So with that, that's really it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new. I gotta get the rest of this herb bed planted up, but I am really excited to have this herb bed. I'm excited to have everything come out of here. I'm excited to taste all the amazing flavors that are gonna come from it. And I hope you guys are growing herbs as well. They're the most expensive crops per pound. They're the easiest crops to grow, in my opinion. And they're ones that you can grow super easily just about anywhere in your garden. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you all learned something new. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership, because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting MIgardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care. Bye.